The Pope heads to Myanmar, how the pontiff plans to address the Rohingya crisis. Smoke and ash, Mount Agung in Bali sparks evacuations and travel disruptions. And kindergarten scandal, outrage in China after allegations of drugging and abuse of young children. Thanks for being with us, everyone. I'm Michael Holmes. Amra has the day off. Welcome to CNN Today. Just a few hours ago, Pope Francis began one of the most sensitive trips he's embarked on yet. He is heading to Myanmar, a country struggling with religious tension and a burgeoning humanitarian crisis. In the days ahead, Pope Francis is expected to speak with Myanmar's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, and the country's top military general about the Rohingya Muslims. He has called them his persecuted brothers and sisters. Meanwhile, Myanmar's Catholic community is anxiously waiting the Pope's arrival, with many of the faithful camping out at Catholic churches in Yangon.
It has been 500 years since Myanmar entered the Catholic religion, and the Pope has never been here before. I want to get blessings from him. I want to hear his Holy Mass. I think the Pope could lead us to peace or give us advice about these religious tensions.
Pope Francis, the first pontiff ever to visit this staunchly Buddhist country, and on Thursday he will then head to neighbouring Bangladesh, where many Rohingya, of course, are now taking refuge. But as Delia Gallagher tells us, it is unclear how the Pope will choose to address the crisis.
This is one of the most diplomatically delicate trips Pope Francis has ever undertaken. He is going to Myanmar and Bangladesh at a time when the United States and the United Nations have accused Myanmar's military of what amounts to ethnic cleansing of its Muslim minority population, the Rohingya. Some 600,000 of them have fled to neighboring Bangladesh amidst reports of rape, murder, the razing of their villages to the ground on the part of the Myanmar's military. Pope Francis will be meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi, perhaps the most well-known member of government in Myanmar, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, but a woman who has come under intense international criticism for not speaking out against the atrocities of the military. Now, her defenders, including the Catholic Cardinal of Myanmar, Charles Bo, who is one of the top advisors to Francis for this trip, say she is not completely in control. It is the military that makes the decisions there. And to that end, Francis will be meeting with the head of Myanmar's military, the Senior General Hlein. And that will be a crucial meeting to determine whether Francis can succeed where others have failed in helping to convince the general to find a peaceful solution to the crisis. Of course, Pope Francis will also be meeting with Rohingya refugees, a group of them in Bangladesh, on Friday. They are perhaps the real reason he is going on this trip. Whether or not he succeeds in finding a political solution to the crisis, his intention in going, as he himself has said, from the Vatican, is to be a sign of hope and to show his closeness to the people of Myanmar and Bangladesh. Delia Gallagher, CNN, Rome.
But it is unclear if his message of peace will resonate in Myanmar, because many there feel threatened by the Muslim minority. Ivan Watson with that part of the story.
Funeral for a fallen man. This was the scene in January after the brazen daylight shooting of a well-known lawyer in Myanmar. The victim, Ko Ni, was an outspoken member of Myanmar's tiny Muslim religious minority. His daughter says he was gunned down while cradling his 2-year-old grandson outside Yangon International Airport.
And when I turned around and looked, and my father was on ground, so I just ran and help him. But at the time, there's no sign of life.
Ko Ni's killing came during a surge of religious tension in this overwhelmingly Buddhist country, a phenomenon CNN reported on 2 years ago.
Who is threatening Buddhism in this country?
Muslim.
Muslims only make up around 5% of the population, but some Buddhist monks preach that they pose an existential threat to the country.
We are worried they will explode our ethnic heritage, cultural buildings, religious monuments, and our brethren when they carry out suicide bombings.
Nowhere is this fear of Muslims more acute than in Rakhine State, where a deadly attack by Rohingya Muslim militants against security forces last August triggered a campaign of reprisals. More than 600,000 Rohingya Muslims have since been driven from their homes across the border to neighboring Bangladesh. Refugees accuse the military of torching their villages, mass rape, and murder. Myanmar says it's fighting against a terrorist insurgency and denies deliberately attacking civilians. The U.S. and the United Nations call it ethnic cleansing. There's little public sympathy in Myanmar for the Rohingya. For decades, authorities labeled them illegal immigrants and denied them citizenship. The Rohingya crisis has raised fears among other Muslims in Myanmar who do enjoy full citizenship rights.
The hate speech overwhelmed the minds of most of the people in Myanmar. If you look at these people, it's all because of fear. And because of this fear, they are afraid of us, and we are afraid of them.
In 2015, there was hope that the election of Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi would calm religious tensions. The murdered Muslim lawyer, Kony, was one of her top legal advisors and a defender of the Rohingya Muslims. Aung San Suu Kyi's government labeled his killing an act of terrorism. A trial of several suspects is underway. But even one of Aung San Suu Kyi's Muslim supporters argues the political climate in Myanmar is toxic.
They keep on using religion as a political tool, and there were a lot of traps. So she has to be very careful. So I'll be very blunt. If she come out and defend the Muslim, it will be a political suicide for her.
Kony's daughter warned her father to be more careful about challenging Buddhist nationalists. For that, he may have paid the ultimate price. Ivan Watson, CNN.
And this just into us here at CNN. Indonesia's disaster management agency is raising its volcano alert on Bali to the highest level, status beware. Mount Agung erupted several times during the weekend, spewing ash, which reached heights of 4,000 metres on Saturday. By Sunday, Australian officials reported the volcanic ash plume had lifted to an altitude of 7,600 metres. And that prompted officials to evacuate about 24,000 residents from hundreds of locations around the island. The eruptions also led to the cancellations of flights, impacting some 7,000 domestic and international passengers who were stranded at the airport. Lombok International Airport temporarily shut down, in fact, due to the volcanic activity. Let's bring in Jackie Jerris now with more on Mount Agung and why these eruptions are dangerous for air travellers. Yeah, this ash has hampered aircraft in the past. It's not pretty.
Yeah, it's a big concern, and now that we're raised to the highest level for this threat, that's growing concerns. And a couple of the reasons why they did that, by the way, Michael, is that they're continuing to see these puffs of ash and smoke come out of the volcano. In addition to that, they're seeing the magma. It's actually visible near the top of the opening, and so that's one of the reasons why they raised and elevated that level. And officials are telling us that not only is it possible, but it's potentially imminent that a larger, more destructive eruption could be happening in the days or weeks to come. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the threat that this has to aviation. And basically, airplanes and ash plumes and volcanic eruptions, they just don't mix. In fact, potentially, they can be catastrophic. So these plumes go high up into the atmosphere, in fact, thousands of meters up, and gets up there near flight levels. One of the obvious hazards, of course, is visibility and damage to the windshield of the airplane and into the cockpit, which could be a problem for the pilots. But more specifically, the concern comes with the engine of the airplane. So think of all of that ash, as well as all kinds of volcanic volcanic rock getting sucked very rapidly into the engine of the airplane. That would interfere with the fan blades and cause some damage and also some erosion. But in the center of that jet engine is the combustion chamber, and pieces of ash can then liquefy and become very hot. Once they cool, they solidify, and that can disturb the airflow in the airplane. This picture that you can see here next to me shows you some of those cooling holes that have been clogged from ash when an airplane actually went through one of those situations. And if that airflow gets disturbed, it can stall. And of course, if the engines stall, that means you don't have anything to support that lift. Let's go back to the maps and talk about the direction that any additional ash or plumes would be moving. So far, they've been tracking down towards the south and towards the east, and that's actually been moving it closer to neighboring Lombak Airport, which was closed down. But as we go through time, particularly when we head into Tuesday and Wednesday, the winds are going to be changing direction from the northeast, which means it would blow any additional ash over the big international airport there. So additional flight problems, cancellations, and rerouting are all possibilities. Last concern, and something else we really need to keep a close eye on here, is the threat of rainfall. You might be asking yourself, what does rainfall have to do with a volcano eruption? Well, if you get heavy rainfall in this area, that gets lifted up along that volcanic mountain, Michael, and can lead to landslides and debris flows. And so just think of really thick cement, almost wet cement, that would be sliding down a mountain at an accelerated rate of speed, causing damage in its path.
All right, Jackie, thanks for that. Jackie Jerris with the very latest on those volcanoes. Now in central Mexico, tell you about another volcano. It's nicknamed Popo, and it erupted 3 times on Friday, sending smoke and ash up to 4 kilometres into the sky. It is located about 64 kilometres southeast of Mexico City and has been active since the mid-90s. Popo regularly emits smoke, but authorities have now placed the volcano on yellow alert. They are urging residents to avoid all outdoor activities. And Pakistan's law minister says he is sorry for provoking outrage after 3 weeks of escalating religious protests. Pakistani forces are trying to bring stability to Islamabad. The protests have paralysed the capital and blocked a key road since early November, at times turning violent. The demonstrations have also spread to other cities. Hospital officials say demonstrations have left at least 2 people dead and more than 250 others injured. Well, protesters are demanding the resignation of Pakistan's law minister over perceived blasphemy. CNN's Sophia Saifi reports from Islamabad.
Protesters in the Pakistani capital of Islamabad continue to occupy an important interchange between the cities of Islamabad and Rawalpindi after clashes between police and protesters on Saturday morning and all day Saturday left more than 100 injured. Now, the police suspended their operation due to it being unsuccessful on Saturday evening, and on Sunday morning we saw the army being called in and paramilitary troops occupying the area around protesters to assist the police and the Frontier Constabulary. At the moment, the TV channels, the TV news channels that had been blocked by the Pakistani Electronic Media Regulatory Authority, that blackout has been lifted. However, there continues to be a ban on social media. So Facebook and Twitter, even Instagram, continue to be blocked in Pakistan. Now, the protest itself was led by a fringe Islamic party which claimed that the government had committed blasphemy by kind of trying to change electoral laws regarding the finality of the Prophet Muhammad as being the last prophet of God in Islam. Now, protesters were calling for the law minister to resign. Yesterday, when clashes broke out in his hometown of Sialkot, protesters actually tried to vandalize his house and break in. He was not in residence, but just a little while earlier, we've received a video that the law minister released apologizing and claiming that he is a good Muslim and making an oath that he does believe in the finality of the Prophet. At At the moment, the entire country continues to be in lockdown. Monday has seen, on Monday, we're expecting schools to be shut down. There are more strikes that have been called by various bar councils, and there continues to be an air of uncertainty as to what will actually need to be done for these protests to end. Sophia Sefi, CNN, Islamabad.
Fighting has intensified in Syria just 2 days before UN-backed peace talks resume in Geneva. Airstrikes and shelling in 2 separate towns killed at least 57 people on Sunday. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says airstrikes carried out by Russia targeted an ISIS village in eastern Deir ez-Zor province. Separately, dozens were killed in government airstrikes and shelling near Damascus. Activists say many of the wounded are in critical condition, that death toll could rise. Well, a shipment of flour arrived in Yemen on Sunday for the first time in almost 3 weeks. Saudi Arabia had blocked all humanitarian aid after accusing Yemen's Houthi rebels of launching a missile against the Saudi capital earlier this month that the Saudis shot down. Jumana Karachi now shows us the struggles of millions of Yemenis and as they face their war-torn country.
The human toll is staggering, the images heartbreaking. Yet there seems to be no end in sight for what is now the world's worst humanitarian crisis. With millions on the brink of famine, aid is slowly trickling back into Yemen. A UN plane carrying urgently needed vaccinations for more than 500,000 children made it into Sana'a on Saturday. Speaking in Amman on Sunday, a top UN official warned that this is not enough.
So yesterday is just a small step forward. We hope that this step forward will be sustained. But as I said, there are many more steps to follow. So yesterday was not an end. It is just a very small step.
The Saudi-led coalition that's been locked in this 2.5-year war against Houthi rebels tightened its blockade of Houthi-controlled territory, including the capital Sana'a earlier this month, after Saudi Arabia intercepted a missile targeting its capital, Riyadh. The Saudi-led coalition said the blockade was to stop weapons shipments to the Houthis it accuses Iran of supporting. This comes as the proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia escalates. But the blockade has impacted relief efforts in Yemen, making an already dire situation even worse in one of the world's poorest countries, where more than half the population is reliant on aid.
With its health sector on the verge of collapse and a devastated water and sanitation system, the largest ever recorded cholera outbreak hit Yemen this year. Other infectious diseases are spreading. Like so many other conflicts, the youngest pay the heaviest price. According to the United Nations, every 10 minutes, a child dies in Yemen of infectious diseases and malnutrition.
Children are one of the biggest victims of a war that is not of their making. I hope very much that world leaders, wherever they are sitting, will come to realize that the current situation in Yemen, for children, but for the Yemeni people as a whole, cannot continue. The situation is catastrophic.
Pleas that so far seem to go unanswered. Jumana Karachi, CNN, Amman.
Allegations of abuse, including drugging and molestation at a Chinese kindergarten, are rocking the country's booming childcare industry, and police are investigating the private school. CNN's Andrew Stevens joins us now live from Beijing. An utterly despicable tale. Tell us how this all supposedly happened.
Well, it all surfaced late last week. There was a video posted online, Michael, in which a mother of one of the children was being interviewed. That video was seen by millions of people, and in it she claimed that several children at this school, RYB Education School in Beijing, and this is a school which caters for 3 to 6-year-olds, several children there had been drugged and molested. She said that her own daughter, 3 years old, had been given a brown liquid, she called it, injected with a brown liquid. She was then told to strip, and she was then, quote, examined by a naked male stranger. As I say, 7 other parents have also said that their parents were injected and molested. The children told their parents that this was a secret, they weren't allowed to tell anyone. CNN actually went down to the school on Friday. The school had been closed by then, but we did speak to a grandfather there who said that his granddaughter had been given a white pill as well. So this is reverberating across the internet in China, as you can imagine. I mean, children hold a very, very special place in China anyway, particularly with the one-child policy. And the government really has been scrambling to try to close it down online. At this stage, there have been 2 people detained, a 22-year-old female teacher at the school. She's been detained about suspicions of molesting the children. And another woman was also detained for fabricating stories, Michael. And this particular fabrication refers to a claim that the Chinese military were involved in this. And that led to the very unusual circumstances of the military, the Defence Department, actually coming out and saying that this was completely incorrect. They brought this statement out on Friday, and the woman has been arrested. But it has absolutely outraged people across this country.
And tell us a little bit more about, I mean, the massive reaction that we had, but there was a sort of element of censorship playing a role as well. Explain that.
Yeah, very much so. That video, the one which was watched millions of times, was taken down pretty quickly. Another tweet which got something like 7,000 comments, another tweet from one of the parents of the children allegedly involved, that was taken down as well. So the government has been very quick to try and tamp this down online. They are investigating. They say that the school is cooperating thoroughly with everything, with all the investigations, but they really are trying to take the heat out of this. So the Chinese middle class obviously is vital to stability in China, and these sort of allegations outrage the Chinese. And it's not the first time we've seen this sort of abuse happening. Just last year, several teachers were jailed for abuse at a school run by the same people, RYB Education, in Shanghai. So it is a very sensitive topic anyway, Michael, and the government really has been pushing hard to try and keep a lid on this, to try to keep the commentary right down while they investigate. But that's just providing more outrage for the Chinese.
Yeah, creating more suspicion. Andrew, thanks so much. Andrew Stevens there in Beijing. Well, it took an apparent coup and protest, but Zimbabwe is under new leadership now. Almost 40 years under a single president ended last week when Robert Mugabe resigned. A Jesuit priest who mediated talks between Mugabe and the military says the former president was relieved when he stepped down. Our David Mackenzie spoke with the close friend of Mugabe.
You saw that they spoke.
And he listened to them?
What are the results? You see the results. That's a sign that you listened.
Did it break him?
It moved him. It moved him in this sense that he realized they are speaking to say, this is enough.
Zimbabwe's new leader is promising to change the culture of the government. CNN's Farai Sabenzo grew up in Zimbabwe. He gives his account now of the country then and now.
You know, it took just 7 days. 7 days from the point I flew in from Nairobi, which is my usual patch, to this minor mini revolution, non-coup, apparent coup, you know, to fold out. place. Look at this. Look at it. This is my home. This is where I went to school. This is where my relatives are. This is where my great-grandmother would tell me stories, which made... Oh, shucks, you're heavy, man. You're so big. This is my nephew, Neil, with whom I'm most pleased.
I want the new president to be better. I want him to be better, more better, 100% better than Robert Mugabe. I don't want him being corrupt.
As we headed into town, it was obvious. It was in the people's faces, the drivers next to my car, the hooters and the horns going off. You knew the moment it happened.
They are not supposed to be impeached.
Yes,
They are supposed to resign.
that's right. It's honorable. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And there you have it. I mean, the people are just it's absolutely incredible, isn't it? They're teeming with joy.
Even when Robert Mugabe held on and wouldn't go, despite all the signs and the pleadings by the army, I expected him to go eventually. It was an exhilarating week in all. No one was nervous. People had found their voice. And of course, I hope, like all other Zimbabweans, that the new man doesn't do what the old man did, and he gives the country a chance to be itself.
I went to them and said, look, so-and-so is missing. And they said, don't even bother looking for them. They're gone. And things like that are sticking in my mind and the memory of my heart at the moment. And I feel very choked up about it. It's been an amazing night. You could feel this electricity in the air. They say that, these are different feet in the same shoes, but all they needed was change. Look, any change from what the country had is a positive step. What remains now is how Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa actually affects his government.
I mean, for any Zimbabwean, if you were Zimbabwean this week, you would have felt this incredible energy coming from people who hadn't spoken for so long. And it was exhilarating. It was just that, just absolutely proud to be from this part of the world.
Farai reminiscing there. Now, I'm Michael Holmes. Thanks for being with us. World Sport is coming up next.
Oh, at first, I fall in love with surfing. I can't even remember when. It's like asking you when you started to walk. I grew up in the Philippines, and we were living in a surf camp. The ocean was just like a part of our house. It's just like our living room, you know?
Surfing is really, really my life. And when I'm in the water, I'm just pretty much free. Siargao Island, why it's special for surfers, it's because all the locals are very nice and they're sharing waves. Everybody will taking care of you and just sharing.
Once you ride on that wave, you don't know what's it gonna offer. Yeah, that feeling of excitement. It's funny, like when I explain it sometimes to my students, like they go, why people get so addicted with this? So I just go, it's like, yeah, your first roller coaster ride and your first kiss.
This is my paradise, this is my home.
Between